Hi folks, we're back, cutting through the matrix, this big strange system we're born into, where your parents take everything for granted because they were brainwashed before you were, and their job is to partly brainwash you and make you think that everything's normal as well, and most folk actually will. If the adult mammals don't train their children what to beware of, the young ones are easy prey to the predators around, and my goodness, we have lots of predators in this society, and they run the world actually. And they don't simply act as simple predators, they use sciences as well to prey on you, because they understand how we tick. The biggest amount of financing that's really gone into humanity and the study of humanity is going into how your mind ticks and how the groups work together and how nations work together, how to create cultures and destroy cultures. And in other words, if you find what creates a culture and what makes it strong, you find ways to destroy it. And that's what they've been up to for an awful long time. The group who run the world and bring you the wonderful United Nations, they're to destroy the cultures by degrading them step by step through means they would actually enjoy at the time. And they give you the culture industry, and everybody copies and mimics what they see, something that even Plato knew an awful long time ago. And you have no idea of the amount of your tax money goes in to these projects to make sure that you're brainwashed in the proper way for the proper way that the authorities want you to behave at any given period. Sometimes they'll take a society down and they'll point out the chaos of the producers. Say, my goodness, look at the crime, the unwanted children, the drugs, the prostitution, the crime. And then they get the police force in, and then they change more laws to have more authority over you. You can't have that in a society where the culture is intact. In fact, you don't need most of the cops either. Everyone knows the basic rules. And you police yourselves. That's how it used to be not too long ago. And people don't know too that before World War II began, a group came from Germany and from Vienna too, from the Vienna School, and they had combined a couple of their doctrines to do with a form of Marxism which they hoped to bring into the world and run men properly, the way they should be organized, and they would dictate from the top down, having the proper intelligentsia do it, to make sure everyone behaved in the proper way, and they'd be ruled like a big machine, you see. But more so than that, they would also work right down to how many people should be born for any given function. No more free choice in anything. It was just so untidy when you were decided, I think I'll try to work at this, and I might not like it, I'll try something else. That was just too untidy. They wanted to pick you at school, find out what you had an ability for, and train you solely in that ability, and that's all you'd know. You would know nothing about any other science, in fact, or any other particular area. That's what the Soviets did. So they came over, as I say, to escape Germany. That was coming into World War II, and they were put up by Britain and the United States and given incredible funding from the international bankers and foundations to set up their vast projects. And here's one of them here. It was called the Radio Project. And we know that Britain, when it started up the BBC, tested out Tavistock techniques on the general population to see if they could alter their behavior. Remember what Skinner found out too. You put something in the people's environment and it will alter their behavior. The radio was one, the television followed it. Because people want to come home at a certain time and everybody shuts up and says nothing as that particular show is airing, and they usually left you with serials, so you had a cliffhanger at the end, and then they would find out how many folk would tune in the next day. They'd altered your behavior. They'd altered what you would be doing otherwise if you weren't tuning in to listen to this episode. And they also aimed primarily again at women. They thought women are far more adventurous when it comes to change. They'll go for it faster than men. So this project here is about the US. They used one on the United States too, in league with Tavistock, of course. And it's called Radio Project. As is, the Radio Project was a social research project funded by, guess who again? The Rockefeller Foundation, to look into the effects of mass media on society. In 1937, the Rockefeller Foundation started funding research to find the effects of new forms of mass media on society, especially radio. Several universities joined up, and a headquarters was formed at the School of Public and International Affairs at Princeton University. That was also part of the psychology department. The following people were involved. Here's the old names again. Paul Lazarus, director of the radio projects. Theodor Adorno. These guys all had it was actually OSS clearance, by the way. Theodor Adorno, a massive player in all of this. He ended up running a big part of the culture industry, designing, along with Bertrand Russell and the Macy Group, the kind of culture they'd bring in the 50s and in the 60s. In fact, he owned a lot of the rights of various groups for their music, and it's often said that he wrote a lot of it. Anyway, it says here, Theodor Adorno, who was chief of the music division, Handley Cantrell, a psychologist at Princeton University's Department of Psychology, Gordon Allport, another of Lazarfield's assistants, went on to be the Tavistock Institute's leading representative in the United States. Frank Stanton, researcher from CBS, sent to help the project, went on to become president of CBS. Amongst the project's first studies were soap operas. This is back in the 30s, known as radio dramas at the time. They were doing what Britain had already tried out with Tavistock. The radio project was researched in the 1938 Halloween broadcast of The War of the Worlds. That's where they used Orson Welles to narrate it over the radio to make it sound like it was actually happening, and they panicked lots of people. It says they found that the estimated 6 million people who heard this broadcast, 25% thought it was real. Most of the people who panicked did not think it was an invasion from Mars that was occurring, but rather an invasion by the Germans. They're trying to see how well their propaganda worked, hyping up the public, you see. It was later determined that because the radio broadcasts from the Munich crisis earlier in the year, the masses were more prone to this. The third research project was that of listening habits. Because of this, a new method was developed used to survey an audience. This was dubbed the Little Annie Project. The official name was the Stanton Lazarfield Program Analyzer. This allowed not only to find out if a listener liked performance, but how they felt at any individual moment, through a dial which they could turn to express their preference, positive or negative. This has become since an essential tool in focus group research. And I've gone through focus research groups with Bernays before. Theodor Adorno produced numerous reports on the effects of atomized listening, which radio supported and of which he was highly critical. However, because of profound methodological disagreements with Lazarfield over the use of techniques like listener surveys and Little Annie, Adorno thought both grossly simplified and ignored the degree to which expressed taste was the result of commercial marketing. Adorno left the project in 1941. That's when he went on to join the Macy Group that was authorized by the President to change the culture of the United States, by the way. When they combined with the Macy Group, the old Vienna Club, and also with the group that came over from another group that came over from Germany. They put them all together and gave them massive funding to control and alter the U.S., using again funding from the government and from the foundations. Rockefeller being a massive investor in this big project. They've never stopped, by the way. Never stopped. And they used the universities, even that one with War of the Worlds, they used the whole psychological department of Princeton University, and departments from the War Department as well were involved in it, to see how they could vastly manipulate whole populations in this fashion. Quite something, isn't it? And folk haven't got a clue what's going on.